Hi everyone. Sorry for the wait. Am I late?
You're absolutely on time.
I
Thank
wasn't
you.
driving, so
That's it. That's fine. Thank you, Lewis Hamilton, for being with us here today. On behalf of HSM and Petronas, I would like to welcome the four times world champion, Lewis Hamilton. So before we begin, I'll just give you a brief introduction on what we're doing here and why we are sitting together. What is happening today is the biggest management, let's say, event of Latin America. So we have around this room top executives from different companies as well as employees from Petronas. And the reason we're gathered here today is kind of to pick your brains on topics such as performance, decision-making, and excellence, which are topics that we, all the three of us, I would say, Petronas, HSM, and you, of course, value a lot. So first to jumpstart this, I'll give the floor to Dennis, which will pose a kind of a tricky question for you.
Not so tricky. And thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here. But before we go to the script, I want to ask you, how does it feel, man, to be in Brazil just 1 week after you overcame Ayrton Senna in a number of world championships? Is it special to celebrate in Brazil?
in all honesty, it doesn't feel real still at the moment. I guess because we're still in the fight. You know, there's still 2 races to go. So I spent the last like 7 days I was with my family and friends, and during that period of time I didn't think about racing once, which is strange, you know, because we had so much to celebrate. But so I don't know, I arrived here today and nothing's different, nothing's changed. But it is pretty cool when you introduce me as 4-time world champion. It's pretty cool. I like it.
But then you see a guy with the Ayrton Senna t-shirt and you remember that you are in Brazil, right? So we are all big fans and we are glad that you are here to do the celebration, man.
Yeah, no, everyone I'm sure knows, I've always been a huge fan of Ayrton's, as I'm sure everyone is here. It's incredible when you come to Brazil and you see just how, what an integral part he is in everyone's heart in Brazil. You know, like every single Brazilian I meet around the world, no matter where, Ayrton is like in their heart. And you know, it's just cool because I know that with the foundation, they're encouraging and helping young kids with education and inspiring young kids. And I was one of those, you know, but from a different country. So it is very cool to be here. And I'm here to try and win this weekend. I've only won here once in 10 years, so, and it was in the wet, which I don't mind, but I hope it's dry this weekend.
Well, we have our fingers crossed, so you can count on that. And that was a great answer, and to a kind of a tricky question, I say. But when we talk about Ayrton Senna, and you said you were inspired by him, I want to go back to the first years of your career, especially when you just began racing with Formula One. So at the very first year, you missed the championship title for just 1 point. Now, we can all agree here that that's not a bad start at all. So what would you say allowed you to get at the very top so quickly? And what would you recommend to our audience as a way of getting fast results without compromising your essence?
Fast results. Well, I don't think there is such thing as fast results. I think, you know, I'm sure in everyone here, you've all been through years and years and years of studying and hard work and trial and error to be where you are today, to have the expertise you have today. So ultimately, it's really about really cultivating a positive mental attitude towards your work, towards the people that you're working with. It's about assessing and understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, working on the weaknesses whilst keeping the strengths. And we all individually, what will work for the person next to you won't work for you. You all have to find your own way. That's, drivers come and ask, kids ask me, how can I be like you? And I'm like, just be you, don't be me. Try and find your way of shining as bright as you can. I think for me, I've been racing forever. So lots of bad experiences, which I'm grateful for because they've helped toughen the skin. And so winning this championship, trust me, it's been 25 years to win this, 25, 26, whatever it is. So It's been a long, long journey. Even when I got to Formula One in 2007, I'd raced for like 18 years or something, you know? So, something like that, you know, like 15 years already. So, unfortunately, people don't get to see the heart. You know, everyone sees you in your jobs now and say, oh, you're so good at your job, but they don't understand what you've gone through, or the doubts, or the time that you spent, the overtime that you spent to be in the position you're in today. Yeah, so there is no quick, I personally don't think there is a quick way to success. It's all hard work, in which you all have obviously done to be where you are today.
That's an amazing.
I love that answer. And if you allow me, I'll look to the group of interns we have here. Those are interns from Petronas. There's no cutting corners. You hear them? Okay. Hear this guy out, okay?
Yeah, Michael Phelps was here earlier this morning. Yeah, and he said exactly the same thing. You know, people think, oh, I won 28 gold medals out of the blue, you know, but they don't know how much I work hard for that, you know. And
The swimmers, they spend like, is it like 6 or 8 hours in the pool every day? Jeez, I swim for 5 minutes and I'm finished. You know, this is crazy, the commitment that, you know, people don't get to see that stuff.
And he said that he saw more talented swimmers than himself get lost in the way because they didn't want to, you know, go deep
work.
on it and
Yeah.
make all the effort they needed to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There is a lot of very, very talented people in all fields, but you don't have to be the most talented. You just have to be the one. You know, you can be the one with it. You could have a smaller amount of talent, but if you work harder, you can overcome. You can beat the other people. If you look at it, there's a lot of great drivers that have been here in the past, and I'm not going to name any, but there are a couple that are exceptionally talented, and if they had worked as hard as some of those, like Rubens, for example, who perhaps didn't have this same natural ability as someone like Kimi, but worked hard and was there longer than anyone else and had great success.
That's true. That's true. So still talking about your career, in 2012 you made a decision which is very difficult for every professional, which was changing from one team to another. So you left McLaren after 6 fruitful years and 1 World Championship to join Mercedes. Well, if you look at it from today's perspective, seems like an easy decision because Mercedes is one of the greatest motorsport teams of all times. You won another 3 World Championships. But back then, Mercedes had just been back for 2 years with no expressive results. So what moved you to take this risk at that time?
That's a good question. It was one of the, obviously, is the best decision of my life. What happened at the time was I'd been with McLaren since, obviously it was McLaren and Mercedes, so I was already still with Mercedes, but they obviously bought their own team. I think for me was, I'd been with McLaren for a long, long time. I didn't really feel like there was anything more for me to do there, you know, like, I kind of just, we'd won a championship, we'd won races, we'd had lots of ups and downs, we'd had generally a great season 2012. And we're embarking on this extension. And then my job for me was to evaluate my options. So I looked at all my options and then I worked out the pros and cons for all of those options. And eventually dwindled it down to McLaren or Mercedes. I loved there was a lot of question about, can a driver win a championship in another team? You know, the ultimate proof that a driver is good is if he can win in more than one car. So that was one thing that I was interested in. Also, I was keen on watching Michael's career. He went to Ferrari when Ferrari weren't very good at the time, and then had all this great success with them. So it's kind of like, how neat would it be to go from a team, McLaren was a winning team, won tons of championships. If I win more championships with them, I'll just be another one of their drivers from the roster. But if I go to Mercedes, that's struggling, I think was the 5th best team at the time, if I can help be a part of the journey to success, that would be so much greater, an achievement personally. So that was really one of the main reasons that I was like, or even contemplating making the decision. And ultimately I had to be smart with understanding what their engine situation is, their investment, understanding their commitment, how many years they're planning to be committed to the sport. So I dug deep, and I had both these 2 great opportunities. Of course, when I decided to stay with go with Mercedes, it came very clear to me, and I was like, I'm going. I didn't have any I'm in an R, and as I was sighing, I was like, yeah, this is exciting. And then I was at Christmas, and I was thinking, oh no, oh geez, have I done the right thing? But then the journey's been incredible, and what I really enjoyed is everything I learned from karting from the younger days, and when I got to Formula 1 at McLaren. Firstly, I made the decision myself. Nobody else around me influenced it. When I was at McLaren, my dad was managing me for years, and he suggested to stay at McLaren. But I wanted to make the decision. I was like, I want to make the decision for myself, and whether it's good or bad, I'm going to live with it. But it was my decision, no one else's. So I was excited about that. And what else? And then, then I just went with it. And geez, I could not even have dreamed that it would be as good as it is today. But I really did do my homework. I really did believe that this would happen at some stage. Maybe not as early as it did, but I really truly believed with the structures. Ross Brawn came to my house. I sat in my mum's kitchen with a cup of tea, and he explained to me where Mercedes was. They had 400 people, how they're expanding, the investment that was going in, where the car is going, all these different things they were planning on doing. And I was like, interesting, because I pay a lot of attention to what happens in the background. So, but it's just been a dream since the day we signed then, and everyone was like, the worst decision you could ever make. Your career is over. And then them eating their words and changing what they say, that's a good feeling.
Again, a great answer. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And since you spoke about risk-taking and decision-making, I have a follow-up question on that. So we know that everybody sitting around this room again is basically making decisions every single day and taking risks as well. That's the way to manage a business, right? Now, as a Formula One driver, you have to conciliate both worlds: instant decisions when you're racing, when you're driving, with mid to long-term decisions, such as the one you just described. Well, now after 10 years with F1, what have you learned about decision-making? How do you prepare yourself, even mentally, to balance those split-second decisions and the long-term ones, which might cost a race or your whole career?
It's a good question. I think it's a little bit different. When I'm in the car, obviously it's instinct. But instinct is backed with experience. For all these years of racing since I was a kid. When I started, we had no money, so I started with the go-kart was bent, and it looked terrible.
They say it takes practice to improvise, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, what I'm saying is, if I started in the best go-kart, I would not be the driver I am today.
Of course.
I started in the worst go-kart, and I had to start at the back and make my way through. So when I make these instinctive decisions when I'm on track, that comes from all that foundation built when I was a kid. And in terms of the more long-term decisions I make, that's come from experience and learning from my peers, people around me, and just gathering as much knowledge and detail as possible to make the most accurate decision, the best decision you can possibly make. But I love, on my race weekends, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made in terms of when I start the weekend, when I get in the car, how I drive those laps, the information I give back to my engineer, the decisions I make of the setup direction I go determines whether I get on pole or not. And those decisions are so crucial for the weekend. If I choose the wrong one, because my engineer doesn't set my car up, I set it up. So I think there are some drivers that give the information and often Nico would give the information and let his engineer make the decisions, which worked great. Me, I like to do it myself more, so I sit with my engineer and I give him a brief of every single corner from entry, mid to exit, every single one. And at the end, I'm like, okay, so these are the 5 things I'm thinking of. How about you? I think we need this one, this one, this one, this one. And, then the next time you get in the car, it's a risk. but it's so rewarding when you've made the right decision. You're like, it was the right one, and I love that. I mean, risk is exciting and exhilarating at the same time, so there can be double rewarding.
That's right. The next question is everything to do what you just said, because Formula One has changed a lot in the past 10 years since you joined it. And I normally hear people ask you questions about how do you prepare physically or mentally as an athlete. But I want to know, how do you prepare for the technological changes that are going to affect the sport and the way you drive? How do you keep up to date with the technological changes?
Well, in my team, there's a lot of people. There's over 1,000 people in my team. There's a lot of engineers. There's 1,500 or 600 people in my team. So I'm the small chink in a long, long chain of people, of very, very talented people. A lot of them have come from Oxford University, from Harvard, so they're the smartest people. So when the rule change comes, the key for me is to extract the knowledge from them, because I don't understand everything that's in the books that they studied. When they show me the rule book, I don't understand everything that's in there. But how do you? So I have to work on the lingo and converting that language into racing terms. And a lot of the engineers, they're all about numbers and very often not very practical. So I bring the practicality part to it. And I already start, already from now, I'm already getting knowledge of what's happening to next year. I keep a close eye. So every time I go to the factory, I'm watching the car develop. I go into the wind tunnel and I take the head aerodynamicist and I say, why are you doing that? What's this about? What's your next move? And then I also have to communicate with them what my limitation is, because for them, they're like, we want to build the car to be like this. And I'm like, yeah, but I need it to be over here. This is what I need. So it's all about communication. I have to really sit with them and really drill it down their throats. What I need, what's my limitation in the car? This is what I can, if you give me this, I can make it go faster.
Great.
But often they think, oh, if we give you that, this will go faster, but that's not usually the case. So that's generally how it is. And the season never stops. So we stop the last race, and straight away I go to the factory, and I'm there for 10 days. And in those 10 days, you're doing a seat fitting. You're doing, you're doing this engineering. You're understanding about the rule change, how that's going to implement on the tires. After the last race, I test. The race is on the Sunday. Monday is off. Tuesday is testing next year's tires. So it's always moving.
Great. Talking about the human side of it, when we think of a F1 driver, we think of talent, strategy, hard work, technology. But when we think of the people who wrote their names on the history of the sport, such as Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, and you, some new elements come, and we have to add it to this mix, such as self-confidence, determination, passion for what you do. So in your opinion, what differentiates a good professional from an outstanding professional?
That's a good one. What an outstanding. I think it's all of those things you mentioned. Obviously, that ultimate belief in yourself, and it's not about people can mistake it for arrogance. It's not. It's just having that pure belief that you are better than you have the ability to be greater than your imagination, and I think it's also the will to succeed. It's the never giving up mentality. It's always wanting to push the boundaries. It's wanting to do that extra bit of time, put that extra bit of work in than the other guy. When I look at myself compared to other drivers, since I was a kid, the best comparison for me, the best way for me to kind of compare myself is if we're driving down the straight and we have a corner coming up, I'm going to brake later than you. I'm going to brake later than you. And that's my mentality. I'm going to go, if you're going to go this distance, I'm going to go that distance. And I think that really is what differentiates the good, because there's lots of good drivers to the slightly better ones, And it's small percentages, but in the bigger scheme of things, it looks bigger.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Now, if you allow me to follow up on what you just said, and that's not on the script, so I apologize, but that history of breaking a little bit later than the others. If I understand correctly what you said in another interview, you had your father pushing you for doing that, right? So how much of this is, a legacy that your father gave to you? Like, I push my kid so that he's the best. How much was, driven by yourself? Because let me tell you why I'm asking this. Most of the people around this room, again, they have kids, and we all want our kids to be successful.
Of course.
But there's a balance between how hard should we push them, how hard should we, just let them be. How do you see that?
I find that probably the most difficult thing that all of us are going to face or are facing. I've got a close friend who's here with me today who's just had a child, and I'm watching how they nurture this baby into what it's one day going to be. And I look at my dad, and there's areas which he pushed me way too hard. He went too far, but there's others that he did exceptional. And I think there's no perfect parent. I think we're not born with all the answers. I think it's great that we all want the best for their future. So yeah, finding that balance is key. And I've met lots of people that have, from either wealthy families who have the greatest kids who, like you would expect to be spoiled, from poor families who also have just great kids and somehow just have come from humble beginnings but just have such great strength to want to go someplace. I personally can only take experience from my dad and want to be as good as him but better. So I take the great qualities of what my dad is. I think if you look at all the great athletes, look at Serena Williams and Venus. Their dad was there. Look at Tiger Woods. The dad was so influential in their careers. And for me, my dad, he stood on the corner in our first year or first days of driving. He stood on the corner. He would go and stand on the track. He's like, that's the number one kid. He breaks here. Now, Lewis, and he would walk a couple of meters later and say, now, Lewis, you have to break here. So there's this one corner at this track, and I would come and I would break there, and I would spin off. I would spin, and there was a pond. It was like a little pond just beyond the corner. I was always in the pond. So I was always covered in water. And through practice, I could break there. And then that core, that then stayed with me. And so yeah, I think ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily his legacy, but all the strengths, all the great values, my dad installed within me, and then helped strengthen those. And ultimately, I guess his goal was to create a better him. All the things that he wished he would be. He wished he was a driver. I'm the driver. So, yeah, I would say. But also, you got to. The one thing that was missing, and I wouldn't change it for the world, is that I wasn't able. You've got to allow your kids also to be who they're going to be, and allow them to enjoy and flourish the way. It's like taking a plant and forcing it to go that way, but actually it wants to go this way. So it's just finding that balance. I don't know the answer. I'm petrified of one day when I have kids, of how I'm going to do it. I have no idea, but I'm going to wait as long as I can, so that maybe by then I have more knowledge as I watch all my friends raise their kids.
Well, I have 2 kids. I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's great insights, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Now, we have been exploring all the upsides of your career, and I know it's hard to talk about frustrations, but we all have frustrations. But right now, 4 times world champion, let's give it to him, guys. Even though being 4 times world champion, I'm sure you have faced some moments of difficulty and frustration during your career. Those moments could even lead you to give up. So how did you face those moments, and what kept you moving forward? Where did you bring this energy to never quit, to never give up?
Again, that comes from my dad. Again, just experiences when I was younger. I used to do boxing training when I was really young. This is just an example. And I was 8, and my dad put me in a boxing ring with this kid. They had to find another kid that was the same height, and he was 10. But he was a real thug from the streets. Like, I'm sure he was a bully at school. and he beat the living daylights out of me in the first round. My nose was bleeding, and my dad came out, and I was crying. And I was like, I don't want to go back in. My dad's like, go back in there. You got to face your fears. So I went back in, and I overcame that fear, and I beat, in that little round, he didn't get one punch in. So kind of that's just really an experience that I've used through my whole career. But I've also taken inspiration from other individuals. Like I've got my younger brother's disabled. Growing up, he has cerebral palsy, so he always falls over, gets back up. But the key was that he would fall over, and he would get back up. He doesn't complain. He keeps going. And there's so many people around the world with far, far worse scenarios than what we are faced with today.
He's a driver also, right?
He races today, yeah. So, he's defied odds. I forgot what was the question again? Yeah. So I think it's just really, there was many times, and particularly one particular time when I went from go-karting to cars, and I was crashing all the time, trying to find the limits, tried to be the best I can be, and I was failing miserably. And I was thinking, I had heard about some other great kart drivers who went to cars and did not succeed. And the fear of that happening was creeping over me like a dark cloud. And I remember going to bed one night thinking my career's over. And the next morning I got up early. I went and I did the longest run I ever did. It was like 13 miles. I never did such a long run. And I got into a really positive attitude. So I used that a lot. Training always helped that. And honestly, it's not always been sunny days for me, And even today, even during this year, there's times I'm at home which you won't see where, am I going to be ready for this race? Am I prepared? Can I still win this championship? So many constant questions all the time, but it's really about turning negatives into positives and keep believing. And I'm really grateful for all the times that I've fallen and all the mistakes, because that's where you learn. You don't learn a lot when you're winning. It feels great. When we win a race and we do an engineering briefing afterwards, there's not a lot to say. Hey, the car is good, the car feels great. But when you have the bad races, that's when you understand more and you learn more and you grow. So, yeah, it's not how you fall, it's how you get up.
Antonio, unfortunately our time is over.
Sorry, I give really long answers.
Nah, but that was
great
awesome.
answers.